The press cameras fired like a firing squad. Flashes lit the marble steps of the tribunal building as Captain Rachel Hahn was escorted out between two MPs, wrists cuffed, chin high. The gray of her uniform looked almost blue under the rain, but her eyes, unflinching, steady, told a story the headlines hadn't yet caught up with. Across the steps, her father stood behind a podium, medals polished, posture perfect. General Victor Hahn, decorated, decisive, America's image of moral discipline. His voice, amplified by the press microphones, carried a surgical calm. My daughter's choices do not reflect our family's values. A murmur ran through the crowd. Cameras zoomed in. The nation already loved a scandal. Loving it with a moral edge was even better. Rachel didn't look at him. The cuffs bit into her wrists, but she didn't flinch. The MPs led her into the van as journalists shouted questions that sounded more like accusations. Captain Hahn, did you leak classified documents? Did your father know? Are you aware your clearance has been revoked? No one asked the real question. Why would a general's daughter risk everything for a leak she didn't commit? Because no one ever suspects the general. Inside the van, the smell of rain mixed with oil and metal. Rachel stared at her reflection in the window. Pale skin, a bruise near her temple, and the faint outline of the family crest ring still on her finger. A ring that now felt like a handcuff of its own. Her lawyer, a tired captain assigned by protocol, sat across from her. You could have taken the plea deal, he said quietly. They would have just dishonorably discharged you and... Rachel turned her head, eyes sharp. And let my father's name stay clean? Not an option. He sighed. You're fighting ghosts, Hahn. The evidence is airtight. Everything traces back to your terminal. Rachel's voice was steady, but the steel underneath it could have cut glass. Then someone forged the iron. The tribunal had moved fast. Too fast. 1 week between accusation and sentencing? Unheard of. Rachel knew what that meant. The fix was in. Her father didn't just know, he orchestrated it. When they'd arrested her in her own office, she'd been reviewing a logistics report. The agents who entered didn't even let her back up the file. She'd watch them unplug her terminal, bag her drives, and walk out like it was routine. The next morning, every news channel repeated the same headline. General's daughter leaks operation data, dozens dead. Her father gave a statement that same afternoon, calm and dignified, as if this were just another PR incident to contain. Rachel had sat in the holding cell watching him on the television. When the interviewer asked, Sir, what's your response to these allegations against your daughter? He'd smiled faintly and said, The military demands accountability, even from those closest to us. The betrayal had been so seamless it almost looked rehearsed. The van stopped at the detention facility. Rachel stepped out into the floodlights. Rain plastered her hair to her forehead. A guard took her arm roughly. Captain Hahn, you have 30 minutes to gather your things. She looked up at the sky, voice quiet. I don't own anything anymore. Meanwhile, at the press podium, General Hahn fielded one last question from a journalist brave enough to break protocol. Sir, is it true your daughter's arrest saved your own command from investigation? His smile didn't falter, but his knuckles whitened around the microphone. That's an outrageous suggestion, he said smoothly. My record speaks for itself. But inside, his mind replayed the sound of a single keystroke. The one that had transferred the classified data from his drive to hers. The one no one would ever know about, or so he thought. That night, as Rachel sat alone in her cell, rain leaking through the window grate, a thought burned through the exhaustion like a flare. He didn't just betray me, he built his career on my silence. And even then, cuffed, accused, and erased, she swore to herself, if I have to burn the name Hahn to ash to show the truth, I will. The thunder outside drowned her whisper, but the promise held like iron. Rachel Hahn had grown up in the kind of home where silence was a form of discipline. Even laughter had to be scheduled. Her father, General Victor Hahn, ran their house like a base. Lights out at 2100. Chores assigned like missions. Mistakes logged, reviewed, and corrected. Not with anger, but with something colder, disappointment. Her mother, Ellen Hahn, was the quiet diplomat between them. A woman made of pearls, posture, and PR polish. Her love was tidy, the kind that came with napkins folded into triangles and compliments that sounded like critiques. You look so much like your father when you're serious, she'd say, as if it were the highest compliment possible. Rachel used to think that being loved by her parents meant being flawless. Now she knew it meant being useful. Even as a child, she had followed her father's routines with military precision. She'd polish her shoes before bed, iron her school uniform before dawn. When she made captain at 28, her father didn't hug her. He simply said, "A Han should never need praise to do her duty." At family gatherings, Victor Han would hold court like a general giving a press briefing. He'd boast about his campaigns, his strategies, his commendations, but never once mention Rachel's work in intelligence operations. If someone brought her up, he'd smile politely and say, "She's still learning to handle the weight of leadership." The same phrase he'd used when she was 8, fumbling through piano practice under his watch. Her mother would nod and refill the wine glasses. When Rachel joined the Army Intelligence Corps, she thought it might finally earn her father's respect, that maybe standing in uniform beside him would make her visible. Instead, it made her an accessory. At public events, reporters would photograph the Han legacy. She'd stand beside her father, smile when instructed, and listen to him say, "She's following in my footsteps, though she's got a long way to go." Every headline paired her name with his. Daughter of war hero joins ranks. Han legacy continues in next generation. Never once Rachel Han, intelligence officer. When she was deployed overseas, he didn't even call. His only message came through channels. Maintain discipline. Family name depends on it. That wasn't encouragement, it was a warning. 3 years into her service, Rachel's unit was assigned to Operation Garnet, a logistics mission near Kandahar. Routine until the day it wasn't. A contractor error sent unverified coordinates to the field team. An airstrike hit a civilian convoy. The fallout was chaos. 7 dead, including 2 children. The press turned feral. The Pentagon demanded accountability. Someone had to be blamed. Rachel was the ranking officer who transmitted the coordinates, even though she'd done so under the direct authorization of her superior, General Victor Han. He had been overseeing the operation remotely as part of a consulting arrangement. When the first inquiry began, Rachel assumed the truth would exonerate her. Instead, the investigation pivoted. Her father's name disappeared from every report. Her signature appeared on every page. The official summary read, "Captain Han failed to verify civilian coordinates prior to engagement." She read it in disbelief. It wasn't just a lie, it was surgical precision. Every keystroke of her clearance access had been replicated using her ID. She remembered confronting him in his office the night before her arrest. He'd been calm, too calm. The blinds drawn, whiskey glass half full. "Dad, the logs point to me. You know that's impossible. You made mistakes. Take responsibility. You ordered that transmission yourself. Watch your tone, Captain." She stared at him, voice cracking. "You're letting them destroy me for something you did." He looked at her the way he'd look at a soldier who'd broken formation. "Better you than the uniform." That was the last time she saw him before the tribunal. Her mother never called. When the scandal broke, Ellen Hahn's only message came through her assistant. "Stay silent. It's better for the family." Rachel remembered staring at that text until her eyes blurred. Better for the family. Not better for the truth. Not better for her. The woman who taught her how to hold a fork, how to smile at banquets, how to appear unshaken, now wanted her erased for efficiency. It was that silence that hurt the most. The kind that said, "We don't love you enough to risk reputation for you." At the tribunal, when the evidence was presented, the terminal logs, the time-stamped data, Rachel recognized her father's style in the details. Every move was crafted like a military maneuver. The forged files carried his cadence. Tidy, minimal, clean. She thought of a line he'd told her once when she was a cadet. "The secret to power isn't control. It's plausible deniability." Now she understood what he'd meant. He hadn't just betrayed her. He'd trained her to understand how. The night before her sentencing, a guard slipped her a sealed envelope. No sender listed. Inside was a printed photo, a digital screenshot of a transfer order. The file name read, "Contract Approval, Operation Garnet." Below the authorization signature, her father's name was typed in clear font, V. Han. Rachel felt her pulse slow. The metadata in the corner displayed the same time and date as the leak. Her father had signed the real order. The sender's address was scrambled, anonymous, but one word sat in the subject line. For her. She didn't know who sent it. She didn't care. For the first time in months, she felt something return. Not peace, not relief, but direction. If he'd taught her anything worth keeping, it was strategy. She would dismantle him with the same precision he used to destroy her. And when it was done, the Han name would stand again. Not as his legacy, but as hers. For 6 months after her discharge, Rachel Hahn disappeared. No address, no trace, no trail. It was easier that way. For her and for everyone pretending she didn't exist. Her name was scrubbed from every database, her ID revoked, her rank erased. Officially, Captain Rachel Hahn had ceased to exist. Unofficially, she became Erin Choi, civilian systems analyst for a cybersecurity contractor in Arlington. But she didn't take that job for the paycheck. She took it because the company handled encrypted defense data for the Pentagon, and that meant one thing, proximity. She wasn't done. Not until the truth came home. The first night in her new apartment, she pinned a photo to the wall, her father in his dress uniform standing beside her at graduation. He was smiling. She wasn't. Underneath, she taped the forged tribunal transcript. Then she drew a red line between the two. It wasn't obsession, it was clarity. Every lie had a pattern, and every pattern had a flaw. She just needed to find it. 3 weeks into her cover assignment, a message appeared in her encrypted inbox. No subject line, no signature, just a single sentence. You were right. He sold them. Attached, a compressed file containing a list of private contractors linked to her father's old operations division. And at the bottom, highlighted in red, Han Strategic Defense LLC, a shell company registered under a Delaware holding group. The irony was brutal. Her father had named the company after himself. He didn't even try to hide it. The file included routing logs from an overseas transaction, millions of dollars transferred to a civilian consultancy in exchange for access to field coordinates during Operation Garnet. The same data Rachel had been accused of leaking. Her father hadn't just framed her, he'd sold her code. The anonymous sender's IP bounced through 4 countries. Impossible to trace. But the metadata in the message contained a clue. A checksum embedded in the file labeled LO. At first, she thought it was random. Then she froze. LO. Layla Ortiz. Captain Layla Ortiz had been her best friend, her field partner, and one of the 7 killed in the Garnet strike. Layla's body was never recovered. The Army declared her KIA and sealed her files. Rachel leaned back in her chair, breath caught between grief and disbelief. If the sender was using Layla's encryption key, there were only 2 explanations. Someone had recovered it from her belongings, or someone in her family was trying to finish what Layla started. Either way, it meant one thing. This wasn't over. She needed help. Someone who could navigate defense systems without leaving footprints. That meant finding Major Kyle Briggs. Kyle was a former data analyst who'd gone rogue after blowing the whistle on procurement fraud. He lived off-grid now, bouncing between burner phones and safe houses. When she tracked him down through an encrypted network form, his first message was simple. Han? As in that Han? Not anymore, she replied. They met at a diner outside Quantico, 3 a.m., dead hour. He looked older, hair buzzed short, eyes too sharp for sleep. She still wore her posture like a uniform. So what do you want, Captain? I want the truth. You want a reason to stick it to the people who ruined you. Fair enough. She slid the flash drive across the table. Decrypt it. Trace it. I need proof he moved that money. He studied her for a long moment. You know if we touch this, we're both committing treason. Then we'll do it quietly. Over the next weeks, they worked like ghosts. Kyle decrypted the files. Rachel reconstructed timelines. Every thread led to the same conclusion. The coordinates leaked during Operation Garnet had been sold to Red Ridge Technologies, a private weapons manufacturer bidding for a new drone contract. The leak wasn't a mistake. It was a demonstration. Her father had sold classified positions of his own troops to show controlled risk capability. The accident that killed civilians had been staged to secure billions in private funding. He'd built a public reputation on honor and a private empire on corpses. The deeper Rachel dug, the clearer the picture became. Ellen Hahn, her mother, had known. Her PR firm had handled the crisis management that followed the Garnet strike, spinning the narrative of a young officer's tragic misjudgment while subtly pushing Victor's heroic intervention. Her own mother had weaponized her daughter's downfall to preserve her husband's myth. That night, Rachel sat in the dark staring at her reflection and saw not shame, but precision. "They wanted me to disappear," she whispered. "They forgot who trained me." One final thread remained, the missing recording of the Garnet briefing. According to logs, the original copy had been destroyed when the investigation closed, but Kyle found a backup archive embedded deep in the Pentagon's old communications network. It was encoded with a secondary clearance key, one registered to General Hahn himself. It took them 3 days to break it open. When they did, the first voice they heard made Rachel go cold. Her father speaking to a private contractor. "Erase her if needed. Family doesn't come before command." Kyle's eyes widened. "Jesus Christ, Rachel." She stared at the monitor, face unreadable. "Download everything." He hesitated. "What are you going to do with it?" "Give it back to the man who taught me loyalty." That night, she packed her uniform, her father's revoked medal, and the flash drive. Her plan wasn't revenge, it was exposure. If her father wanted legacy, she'd give him one. Public, irreversible, final. The next morning, she made her first move. She sent a single message to the Secretary of Defense's office under her real name. "You're honoring the wrong Hahn." Attached, a single invitation request to the upcoming Pentagon Heroes Gala. The night her father would receive a Lifetime Service Award. It wasn't just poetic, it was tactical. Because if truth was going to end him, it would do so under the same lights that built him. The week before the gala, Washington glowed with self-congratulation. Billboards, press cycles, and digital screens all carried the same image: General Victor Hahn, Lifetime Achievement recipient. The city adored him. Decorated, photogenic, unshaken. The kind of man whose medals glittered brighter than his sins. Rachel watched the coverage from her safe flat in Arlington. Every camera flash felt like a countdown to detonation. On her desk, the flash drive, the court transcript, and a folded photo. Her and her father standing at her commissioning ceremony. She'd been smiling in that picture. He hadn't. Now it would be reversed. She hadn't told Kyle Briggs what she planned exactly. He'd helped her decrypt the files, but he didn't need to know the execution. He'd argued with her the night before. "If you do this live, they'll arrest you before you finish your sentence. If I don't do it live, they'll bury it before breakfast." He looked at her then, tired, resigned. "You're really his daughter, you know that?" "No," she said quietly. "I'm what he pretended to be." Her entry into the gala was flawless. The invite had been approved 2 days earlier by the event director, thanks to a quiet phone call from Anna Sharma, a sympathetic attorney who'd once represented military whistleblowers. Anna's only warning had been simple. "If you go through with this, make it clean. Truth is only powerful when it's undeniable." Rachel arrived in full uniform, every ribbon earned, not inherited. The crowd turned, murmurs spreading. Whispers trailed her like smoke. Is that her? The court-martialed captain? The general's daughter? Ellen Hahn, radiant in silver silk, froze mid-conversation when she saw her. The practiced PR smile faltered for the first time in decades. "Rachel," she breathed, glass trembling slightly in her hand. "You weren't invited." Rachel's voice was calm. Neither was the truth. Victor Hahn saw her next. For a moment, his expression didn't move. The perfect general mask. Then his jaw tightened. He turned to his aide and muttered, "Get her out." But before anyone could act, the MC called out, "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage our honored recipient, General Victor Hahn." Applause. Cameras. The orchestra swelled. He stepped up, shaking hands, smiling for the flashbulbs. Rachel moved closer to the stage, threading through tables of brass, billionaires, and bureaucrats. Her heartbeat was steady. She'd lived through interrogation, torture training, betrayal. This, this was theater. As her father began his speech, the words rolled out polished and perfect. Service, Rosar, he said, isn't about glory. It's about sacrifice. The hypocrisy almost made her laugh. And sometimes, he continued, sacrifice means protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Rachel reached the stage steps. Two security guards shifted. She held up her old clearance badge. Captain Han, Operations Intelligence, official business. They hesitated. The uniform did its work. No one questions confidence wrapped in command. On stage, her father glanced at her mid-sentence, a flicker of shock breaking his composure. "What are you doing here?" he hissed through his teeth. She smiled for the cameras, presenting a gift. Before he could stop her, she turned to the defense secretary seated nearby. "Sir," she said, voice carrying through the microphone, "with your permission." Without waiting, she stepped to the podium and plugged in the flash drive. The screens behind them flickered. The live feed switched. The gala crowd gasped. On screen appeared grainy footage. The encrypted file Kyle had decrypted. Her father's voice. "Erase her if needed. Family doesn't come before command." Silence. Electric. Suffocating. Total. 1,000 eyes turned from the stage to the general. He took a step forward, shouting over the static, "That's doctored." But Rachel was ready. The next clip appeared. Metadata timestamps, unedited logs, his signature over transfer documents. Every lie detonated on 4K display. Her mother's face turned white. Officers whispered. Cameras flashed like lightning. Rachel spoke calmly into the microphone. "My name is Captain Rachel Han. I was accused of leaking coordinates during Operation Garnet. Those documents were forged by the man you just heard." The crowd froze. You could hear the click of pens from the press tables. "He sold those coordinates to a private defense contractor. Civilians died. I took the blame." Her father lunged forward, shouting, "Get her off that stage." Security didn't move. They were waiting, watching. The weight of truth had shifted the chain of command. Then a voice came from the back of the hall. "Let her speak." It was the defense secretary. He rose slowly, eyes fixed on Victor Hahn. "We'll finish this ceremony with honesty, General. Sit down." The general's knees didn't obey at first, but he sat. Rachel turned back to the mic, voice trembling only slightly. "I don't stand here as a daughter or a soldier. I stand here as the person you erased, the name you traded for contracts. You once told me loyalty means silence. I learned it means speaking when no one else will." When she stepped back, the room didn't clap. It stood. The sound wasn't applause, it was something heavier. Recognition. Reverence. Her father didn't look up. After the gala, chaos erupted. News outlets streamed live reports. Headlines flipped within hours. General Victor Hahn implicated in espionage scandal. Captain Rachel Hahn vindicated. By midnight, a full Pentagon investigation had opened. The flash drive had been copied, authenticated, sealed. Rachel watched from a distance, calm amid the storm. Kyle texted her 2 words. "You did it." She replied, "We did." He responded once more. "He'll fall hard." Her answer came slower. "Then maybe he'll finally learn how it feels to be human." At 3:47 a.m., she sat alone in the Lincoln Memorial Plaza, rain slicking the marble steps. She held the revoked medal, her father's, turning it in her hand until dawn blurred the horizon. "Honor isn't inherited," she whispered. "It's earned in truth." And for the first time since her arrest, she let herself cry. Not for defeat, for release. The next 72 hours unfolded like a second war. Quiet, surgical, devastating. General Victor Hahn's name vanished from every building plaque, every Pentagon briefing, every page of leadership values pamphlets his PR team had spent years perfecting. His face disappeared from walls faster than it took to hang them. Rachel didn't watch the news. She didn't need to. She could feel it in the air. The shift in gravity when a powerful man's empire finally collapses. At 0600 the morning after the gala, a military convoy arrived at Hahn's residence in McLean. Neighbors watched from windows as agents from the Defense Intelligence Service stepped through the gates. They didn't knock. Inside, Ellen Hahn stood frozen in her robe at the top of the staircase. Her husband sat in the living room, still in uniform, medals laid out on the table like relics of a lost religion. He didn't resist when they handcuffed him. Didn't argue, didn't look at her. Only one sentence left his mouth. Tell my daughter she's still ungrateful. Ellen sank onto the stairs, mascara streaking across her cheek. In the corner, the television played on mute, her own husband's arrest live on CNN. The headline banner, General Hahn under investigation for espionage and cover-up. At the Pentagon, Rachel waited outside the inquiry room. She wasn't allowed inside the proceedings. Conflict of interest, they said, but she didn't mind. The silence in the hallway was enough. Major Kyle Briggs approached, holding 2 coffee cups. You should sleep, he said. I did, she lied. He sat beside her on the bench, exhaling slowly. They're going to prosecute him under military court first, federal after. She nodded. After a moment, he added quietly, Do you feel anything? Rachel looked at the blank door ahead of her. Not yet. Inside that room, the defense secretary read out each charge. Espionage, conspiracy, perjury. But what caught every officer's attention wasn't the charges. It was the evidence. The recording was authentic. The financial transfers were traceable. The metadata trail was flawless. Victor Hand didn't try to deny it anymore. He only said, Everything I did for the good of the system. The secretary leaned forward. You framed your own daughter. She was expendable. The silence afterward was colder than any verdict. That afternoon, Rachel received a single envelope, unmarked, hand-delivered by an aide. Inside, her reinstatement letter, her record restored. Rank, captain, status, active reserve. Attached in a neat handwritten note, for serving truth under fire. Signed, Defense Secretary J. Carver. She stared at it for a long time before folding it back. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like exhumation, like someone had dug up her name and placed it gently back where it belonged. 3 days later, she went to see her father. The detention wing of Fort Belvoir was sterile, echoing with distant steps. He sat behind glass, pale, smaller than she remembered, stripped of uniform and illusion. When she entered, he looked up with a bitter smile. So the prodigal daughter returns. She didn't sit. You called me expendable. He shrugged. You were always sentimental. You can't lead with sentiment. I didn't lead with it, she said. I survived with it. He leaned forward, voice sharper. You think this makes you a hero? You destroyed your own bloodline? Rachel's jaw tightened. No, she said quietly. You did that when you chose your reputation over your humanity. He laughed, low and broken. I made you strong. You made me alone. Silence filled the space between them. Then she added softer, but I learned what strength actually means. When you stop needing to be feared. He looked away, suddenly old, and for the first time, Rachel felt not anger, but something colder. Pity. She stood. You taught me loyalty to command, she said. I learned loyalty to conscience. Then she left him sitting there, staring at the glass that would never reflect pride again. When she stepped outside, Ellen was waiting by the parking lot, sunglasses hiding red eyes. Rachel, her mother said, voice trembling. Was it worth it? Rachel didn't answer immediately. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something small. A medal, its ribbon frayed. Her father's service medal. She placed it on the hood of Ellen's car. Honor isn't about who wears this, she said softly. It's about who deserves to. Her mother's lips parted as if to protest, then closed. The silence between them was decades old. Now it was complete. Rachel walked away without looking back. That night, she returned to the empty apartment where her life had begun again. The walls were bare except for one thing. A single sheet of paper tacked to the corkboard. Her reinstatement letter, signed and stamped. She stared at it for a long while, then reached for her lighter. Flame licked the edge of the page, curling it black. She dropped it in the sink and watched it burn out. She didn't need validation from the same system that had once crucified her. The truth was her only rank now. 2 weeks later, a reporter from the Washington Sentinel called, begging for an interview. Captain Hahn, she said breathlessly, This could redefine military ethics. People deserve to hear your side. Rachel paused. They already did, she said. They just didn't believe it until it hurt. And she hung up. At dawn, she drove to Arlington National Cemetery. She stood before a small grave, Captain Layla Ortiz, the woman who had died because of her father's greed. She placed a fresh flower beside the stone. You saved me even after you were gone, she whispered. I hope this makes it even. The wind moved softly through the white markers. Somewhere, a flag snapped in the distance. She turned, sunlight cutting through the morning haze. It struck her face like absolution. And for the first time in years, Rachel Han didn't feel erased. She felt seen. 3 months after the arrest, the Han name had become shorthand for betrayal and reform. Documentaries dissected the scandal, ethics lectures cited it, and op-eds debated whether Rachel Han was a hero or a traitor who had broken the code of silence. She ignored them all. She'd spent too many years living under headlines that were never written by her hand. Now, her life was quiet, intentional. The uniform still hung in her closet, pressed, untouched. Some days she thought about putting it on again, just to remember who she used to be. But every time she looked at it, she saw ghosts. Not of her father, of herself. The version who believed obedience was honor. She worked part-time now as a systems consultant for a veterans outreach program, under a different name. She taught cybersecurity to retiring service members, helping them start new lives in the civilian world. The irony wasn't lost on her. The woman once accused of leaking data now protecting others from digital exploitation. When asked why she did it, she'd smile faintly. Because integrity is only real when it's useful. The world hadn't forgotten her father. The trial was still ongoing, though the outcome was inevitable. Every day, another witness came forward, analysts, contractors, even subordinates, confessing how the general had coerced them into signing off on illegal transfers. Each revelation tore another piece of his legacy apart. Rachel didn't watch the coverage, but one evening, as she walked past a cafe, she caught her father's image on a muted screen. Hunched in court, his eyes hollow. The caption read, "Prosecution seeks maximum sentence." She stopped for a moment, just long enough to feel the ache. He had built his name on honor and destroyed it with fear. And she had undone it with truth. For the first time, she realized how much they resembled each other. Both relentless, both unbending. The difference was what they served. He had served ego. She had served conscience. And conscience, no matter how heavy, never rusted. A letter came in early spring. Handwritten. Postmarked from a military penitentiary. Her name on the envelope in a shaky scrawl. She almost threw it away. But curiosity won. Rachel. They tell me you'll never visit again. I don't blame you. You think I'm a monster. Maybe I am. But monsters still know when they've been defeated. You remind me of your mother. Too proud to lose quietly. If this means anything, know that I was wrong about you. You were never weak. You were the only soldier I raised who understood what war actually is and the kind that never ends. You fought it better than I did. Victor Han. She read it twice, then folded it and tucked it into her jacket pocket. Not forgiveness, not even closure, just acknowledgement. A ghost of humanity from the man who'd buried his own. Her mother, Ellen, had fled the city after the trial. The PR empire she'd built collapsed overnight when emails surfaced showing her involvement in narrative control after the Garnet disaster. Sponsors withdrew, clients vanished. She lived quietly now in a small apartment in Seattle. Rachel called her once. No cameras, no witnesses, just a call. When Ellen answered, her voice trembled. Rachel? Yes. Silence stretched, long, brittle. Finally, her mother said, I did what I thought I had to. Rachel's reply was simple. I know, so did I. That was all, and it was enough. The Pentagon reinstatement became official in May. Rachel's record restored, name cleared, status honorable. She received the formal letter via courier, gold sealed and stamped. At the bottom, an optional checkbox read, eligible for reassignment. She stared at it for a while, pen hovering. Then she left it blank. Some wars didn't need returning to. Instead, she visited Arlington again. The air was warm, sunlight washing over the rows of white stone. She knelt by Layla Ortiz's grave, the friend who had died to protect the integrity Rachel later defended. Guess I finally did something right, she said softly. I just wish you could have seen it. From her pocket, she pulled the folded letter her father had written. She read the last line again. You fought the kind of war that never ends. Then she tore it cleanly in half and placed it under Layla's flower, because that war did end, at least for her. That evening, Rachel stood on her apartment balcony overlooking the Potomac. The water shimmered gold against the city lights. In her hand, she held her father's medal, the one she'd taken from his table months ago. She turned it over once, twice, then threw it into the river. It vanished beneath the surface with barely a ripple. Some symbols didn't need to be buried with people. They needed to drown quietly, far from the noise that once glorified them. As the sun disappeared, her phone buzzed. A message from Kyle Briggs. You still planning on disappearing? Maybe. You'll come back. People like us always do. Not to war, she typed back. To work that matters. He replied with one final line. That's what real soldiers do. When she finally closed her eyes, she dreamt of nothing. No tribunals, no uniforms, no headlines, just silence, and light through water. For the first time, she didn't wake up afraid of her last name. It no longer meant legacy or shame. It meant something quieter, rarer, survival. And survival, in the end, was its own kind of victory. The world had moved on, but the echoes of the Hahn scandal lingered like smoke over the city. Politicians used it as a cautionary tale. Cadets whispered her name in ethics lectures, sometimes as a warning, sometimes as a prayer. Rachel Hahn lived somewhere between both meanings. Summer came early that year. She had rented a small cottage outside Annapolis, surrounded by pines and river light. The air smelled of salt and new beginnings. Every morning, she brewed coffee and wrote, not reports, not statements, but fragments of thought. Truth doesn't shout, it endures. Honor isn't inherited, it's practiced. Forgiveness isn't weakness, it's release. Pages stacked up, one by one. By August, she had filled a notebook. The first thing she'd written for herself in years. No stamps, no clearance levels, no signatures required. One afternoon, a letter arrived from the Pentagon. Inside was a short note and a formal request. Captain Hahn, we would be honored if you would deliver a guest address at the National Ethics Symposium next month. For a long time, she said nothing. Then she smiled, the kind of quiet smile that doesn't rise to the lips but warms from within. Not vengeance, not vindication, recognition. The kind she didn't need, but accepted for those who still fought to be heard. The auditorium was packed the day she spoke. Uniforms, civilians, cadets, every stripe and shade of service filled the hall. When she walked to the podium, the hum of whispered speculation rippled through the crowd. The moderator's voice introduced her. Our next speaker requires no introduction. Her story has redefined what integrity means under pressure. Please welcome Captain Rachel Hahn. Applause rose, slow and steady. She waited until it faded completely before speaking. I was taught, she began, that loyalty meant silence. Her voice was calm, resonant, measured. That obedience was the highest form of service, that protecting a name mattered more than protecting truth. She paused. No one told me that silence, too, can destroy lives. A hush spread through the room. I made a mistake once. Not when I defied orders, but when I believed that honor was something given to me by blood. I learned that honor isn't what you inherit. It's what you defend, even when you stand alone. Eyes fixed on her, commanders, recruits, journalists, all waiting for the next sentence. Leadership without conscience isn't leadership. It's vanity in uniform. The silence after that line was so complete she could hear the faint hum of the air conditioning. She closed her speech with only 8 words. Truth doesn't serve power. Power must serve truth. When she stepped down, no one clapped immediately. They stood, and that was louder than applause. Then, after the symposium, she walked out into the open air. The sun glared off the Potomac like glass. A group of young cadets waited near the steps, still in their training uniforms. One of them, a woman barely 20, stepped forward nervously. Ma'am, she said, my father's a general. He says emotion makes you weak. Rachel smiled. That same quiet smile again. Then prove him wrong. Lead with both your head and your heart. The cadet nodded, eyes bright with something Rachel hadn't seen in years: belief. That night, Rachel sat by the river again. The water glowed gold beneath the last stretch of sunset. In her hand, she held her father's reinstatement letter, the one she had once burned. A second copy had been mailed by the Pentagon for official record. She tore it once, then twice, and let the wind scatter the pieces into the water. Because she didn't need it anymore. Because she'd already been restored. Not by them, but by herself. In her journal, she wrote the last line she would ever write about her family. He built an empire of metals. I built one of meaning. She closed the notebook, slid it into a drawer, and turned off the lamp. Outside, the night hummed. Quiet, steady, alive. Like the world exhaling. Somewhere across the country, the news played footage from her speech. The anchor's voice carried through living rooms and base halls alike. Captain Rachel Hahn, once court-martialed, now commended, delivers a defining address on integrity. Her mother watched from Seattle, tears streaking her face. Her father, in a military hospital, closed his eyes and turned away. The next morning, Rachel woke before dawn. She brewed her coffee, opened the window, and watched sunlight crest over the tree line. The air was cool, the kind that tasted like forgiveness. And for the first time, she didn't feel like a soldier or a daughter or a name. She felt simply human. Honor doesn't demand perfection. It only asks that you stand when it matters.